Welcome everyone to the Aspire's Ed Talks. We all have progressed so far in the field of assisted reproduction. And today we will discuss one more advance in this field. This is on the subject of mitochondrial transfer. Is it a reality? And today we have no other than Dr. Meenakshi Choudhary with us, who is an expert in the field of mitochondrial transfer. And she is a double doctorate and got her MD from Mumbai. I'm very happy to say that. She's from India. And then went on to do her PhD in early human embryo development from the Newcastle University in UK. She's also a fellow of the Royal College of OBGYN, and she's an esteemed and accomplished senior reproductive medicine consultant based in Newcastle. She's the lead for egg and mitochondrial donor program and also is the HFEA person responsible for research. Meenakshi has been recognized as a global expert in the field of fertility, and she's at this point in time a committed advocate for women's reproductive health through her involvement in esteemed organizations. She's the trustee and the current chair of the board of the National UK Charity Sperm Egg Embryo Donation Trust and an elected secretary on the National Executive Committee of the British Society of Pediatric and Adolescent Gynecology. She's such an important, prominent figure in this field of reproductive medicine that she has been featured in the leading outlets of UK media, such as The Guardian, The Times, and BBC as well. So the top-notch media have covered her. And I think we are very delighted to have Meenakshi here with us and to share her expertise with us. So I'll start off with you, Meenakshi, and we will go ahead with the program.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Meenakshi. I'm so proud to read your CV. So, Meenakshi, I have a few questions for you. We are going to discuss mitochondrial transfer. And what exactly is mitochondrial transfer is my question. And what is the story behind its development?
Right. First of all, I would say that it's my privilege to be here doing this podcast with you, Dr. Duru Shah, because you've been my mentor when I was doing my MD in India, decades ago, I should say. But I would always have that respect. And whatever I gained from you has helped me get to this point. And it is my pleasure to share with our listeners and viewers about our journey, the fascinating journey from vision to reality of mitochondrial transfer or mitochondrial therapies. So when we talk about mitochondrial transfer, I would say that it's a really revolutionized technique, a groundbreaking technique in reproductive medicine that involves replacing faulty mitochondria in a mother's egg with the healthy mitochondria from a donor egg. That is just in simplistic terms, that's what it means. The process aims to prevent the transmission of mitochondrial diseases, which can cause severe healthcare problems. The idea emerged from the understanding of mitochondrial diseases. So I come from Newcastle, which is in the UK, in the northeast of England. We have got a tertiary level referral center for families and people suffering with mitochondrial DNA disease. And what it was realized that we can only offer symptom management if they have debilitating conditions. We cannot cure it. And the traditional reproductive methods had limitations. And that's when the idea came, can we do anything to detect it early, fix it early, and prevent this chain of inheritance of this deadly condition, which can lead to deaths in children, in the offspring, or later in life. So for that, scientists and clinicians got together and recognized the potential to improve the health outcome for future generation by addressing this root cause of this debilitating condition. That's how mitochondrial transfer came into existence.
So then we hear of mitochondrial DNA, we hear of mitochondrial RNA, so nuclear DNA and mitochondrial DNA. So question is, how do you differentiate between the two? Are they the same or is it different? What exactly is it?
Right. So it's very important to understand the distinction. So we all are born from one single large scale cell, that is the fertilized zygote. So it contains two types of genomes we should talk about. One is the nuclear genome, or the which contains the nuclear DNA, and the other one is the mitochondrial DNA, which is present in the mitochondrial genome. So we all are 2G humans. So the
Yeah.
nuclear DNA is located in the cell nucleus, and it is inherited from both the parents. That is, the one half comes from the mother, one half comes from the dad. It contains the majority of our genetic information, which determines the genetic traits that we all possess, like our eye color, the hair color, the height, and it gives us a genetic identity. This forms more or less 99.9% of our genetic identity, or our DNA. However, there is a very small fragment, 0.1% of our DNA, which is present in the mitochondrial genome, or the mitochondrial DNA. This is found in the mitochondria, which are the tiny pieces or tiny fragments present in the cytoplasm of our cell, and also referred to as powerhouses or batteries of our cell. It is solely inherited from the maternal side, so from the mother, and it passes on to both boys and girls. But again, only the girls can pass it on. It doesn't give us our genetic identity or traits, but it is very, very important. This 0.1% of DNA can lead to 99% of providing, or 90% or more providing the energy that our different organs and system needs to work properly or efficiently. So it has a crucial role in energy production. So that's mitochondrial DNA. It is a tiny circular DNA compared to the helical linear DNA of the chromosomes that we have for nuclear DNA. So that's the main difference one needs to understand.
Yeah. So when you're doing a mitochondrial DNA transfer, or you're doing a
Yes.
mitochondrial replacement, or whatever word you technology do you use, it's called replacement transfer and mitochondrial transfer. Is it the same?
Right. Okay. So when we talk about, there are a lot of different terminologies that has been used. When we talk about mitochondrial transfer, people would think that we are transferring some mitochondria into a egg. However, mitochondrial replacement therapy is more appropriate term or terminology, because what we are doing is we are replacing the faulty mitochondria or the DNA mutations that a mother has by using donor egg, which contains the healthy mitochondria. So, mitochondrial replacement therapy is the more appropriate term. If we look at the regulatory body in the UK, the HFEA, which is also known as Human Fertilization Embryology Authority, we prefer to use the term mitochondrial donation treatment. The If we look at mitochondrial donation treatment, that's because the mitochondria is donated for someone else's treatment, and that's what we prefer to use the term as mitochondrial donation treatment.
And what is cytoplasmic transfer? Because we
Right.
were reading a lot about cytoplasmic transfer.
Yes. So cytoplasmic transfer differs from mitochondrial transfer based on that. In cytoplasmic transfer, only a small amount of cytoplasm from an egg is taken and then injected into a recipient egg. So from a donor egg, it is taken, which will contain the mitochondria and the cellular components, and it is replaced in the recipient egg, which means that the recipient egg is still the whole egg. So it contains recipient's mitochondria as well as recipient's nuclear DNA, but it has few extra components from the donor egg's cytoplasm. However, mitochondrial transfer is a more targeted approach that specifically replaces the mitochondria, as I mentioned earlier, in the recipient egg. So, if we look at a egg yolk, which contains an egg, which contains the egg yolk, which is our nuclear DNA, and the egg white. So, egg white is the cytoplasm which contains our mitochondrial DNA. So what happens is the egg yolk is taken out from the donor egg, so it becomes an enucleated egg white, and then similarly the recipient egg also, the nucleus is taken out, the egg yolk is taken out, but her egg white is discarded and that egg yolk is put inside this. So we reconstitute this egg. That's
Yes.
mitochondrial transfer.
So when would you do which one? When would you do a mitochondrial transfer and when would you do a cytoplasmic transfer?
Okay, so cytoplasmic transfer initially was started to look at those women who may have um, infertility and had repeated cycles of IVF, and they were not working, or the embryos were resting, so recurrent implantation failure, poor embryo development, poor quality eggs. And what the theory or rationale behind that was, if we use transfer cytoplasm from a younger donor into a recipient's egg, say if the recipient is 45 years old, and we are transferring that, it would correct the energy within the embryo during development or division stage, and may improve the quality of embryos. So in specifically in those cases, it will not prevent transmission of any mitochondrial DNA
Yeah.
disease.
So in short, we are talking about mitochondrial transfer mainly for prevention or transmission of any disease, which is, probably being transferred through the mitochondrial DNA. Am I right?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. Now, coming to, we are using it during reproduction, mainly in various reproductive disorders. Where do you find it most useful, and where are you doing it now in your center? What are the most common issues you all are solving with this problem?
Right. Okay. So Newcastle is uniquely placed, and it's a recognized center for excellence, especially because we are the only licensed center in the UK to offer this treatment for clinical translation purposes. Um, it has taken us a very long journey to get there. So we did research initially for 10, 12 years. And after 12 years of getting the first research license to attempt it in research setting, we got the approval to incorporate it into clinical practice. So the clinical translation was a very lengthy process. And it required several scientific reviews, public debates, and parliamentary debates before the approval was granted in 2017. So, in Newcastle and in the UK, the law is very clear. It states that it can only be used for mitochondrial donation therapies, can only be used for women who have got severe mitochondrial DNA mutation load or high mutation load, which can result in lethal or severely debilitating condition in a child, which can be passed on. So it's they assess the cases. We have to submit every single case before we do it to the regulatory body, the HFA. They assess individually each case by case basis. They look at it. Is there any other option possible for this woman, or is mitochondrial donation therapy the resort that we have to go for? So it should be considered as the last resort. There are other reproductive options available for women. So if a woman has got mild disease and her own mutation load is, say, very low, 10% or 15%, it is unlikely she would have a condition where she would lose a child, or the child would have severely affected health problems, multisystem organ failure. So in that case, she could just continue to try naturally to have a baby, go for prenatal diagnosis, or go for pre-implantation genetic testing. If they have got very high mutation load, or they continuously produce embryos with high mutation load despite themselves not having high mutation, or if they are homoplasmic, which means 100% of their mitochondria are faulty, in those situations, HFA would permit replacing it with mitochondrial donation therapy. So that's the only reason why it is offered and available to patients. It's heavily regulated. Most important thing is that we want to break the chain of inheritance and save the family or help the families suffering with this genetic gamble or roulette not to pass on these deadly conditions to their offspring and future generations to come.
I think it's a brilliant scientific advancement, and I think this is something which every parent wants, that they shouldn't be transferring any major disorder to their children because they know what they will go through. And I think it's very sad. It's a therapy after diagnosis. Otherwise, the only treatment we had was, bring on an abortion or terminate the pregnancy or whatever if there is a problem. But today there is hope for these people who have such problems, and therefore I'm sure this procedure must be very complicated. How do you do this procedure? Just to know what exactly do you do?
Yeah. So, first and foremost is the selection, the right selection of the right group of women who would benefit from this treatment. So that's carefully selected, and then we have to get the regulatory approval so that that person can be taken through the mitochondrial donation therapy. Once that has happened, we have to align her treatment and synchronize it with the donor treatment because as it's a transfer technique, we have to do it. I would like to mention here briefly that in UK, two techniques have been licensed, maternal spindle transfer and pronuclear transfer. The difference between the two is the maternal spindle transfer is done before the egg is fertilized. So the spindle of the woman's egg is the one which contains her DNA, can be taken out and uh, re- replaced it into the enucleated uh, egg of the donor. However, this is not the technique we have yet started in our clinical practice just because spindle is very sensitive. So we go for the other technique, which is known as pronuclear transfer. So when the egg is fertilized, it will, few hours after fertilization, you would see two large pronuclei or nuclear structures seen, which one comes from the mom, one comes from the dad, and each contains 23 chromosomes. So that is easy to see, and we can take it out. So that's what happens. So the woman goes through a collection cycle. We collect her eggs. The donor would go through an egg collection cycle. We will collect her eggs. Both of them would have the eggs fertilized after collection with the partner sperm. Unless the partner is related to the donor as well, then we cannot use it. In that case, we'll have to use it. But once we have fertilized those eggs, we take the pronucleus out. It's similar to ICSI procedure where we pass in a fine needle into the egg and inject the sperm, but this is a different process. The needle is wider than the ICSI one because it's the pronucleus we have to take it out. We don't want to cause any damage because if we damage the pronucleus, we may lose a chromosome, gain a chromosome, anything can happen. So we delicately take it out from the egg and put it inside the enucleated donor egg. So donor egg will have the healthy mitochondria in it, and then we replace the pronuclear of the woman's eggs, fertilized egg, into that. Once that is done, we have to expose it to some chemicals. The media would have some chemicals which would help with the fusion of this because if we just replace it, it's not going to fuse, and then we will not have the egg embryo surviving. So we use some uh, solutions that helps it to bind together. Once it fuses, then we monitor it in the lab for 5 days or so to see how the embryo is developing. And then the blastocyst stage embryo, around 5 days after egg collection, can be frozen. Or transferred into a woman, depending on into the recipient, depending on what she would like to go ahead with. I have to say that it may sound simple in concept, especially because it involves the ART techniques as such, but it is really complex in execution, especially the fine technical skills required for that and the fusion. So there are challenges throughout.
Hmm. And how do you make sure you picked up the right pronucleus? And how do you make sure that you haven't harmed the pronucleus?
Yes. So, as I mentioned, that we had to design specifically the pipette that we used for drawing out the pronucleus. So it's much wider than the ICSI pipette, and it is not easy and it is not possible, feasible to distinguish between the male pronucleus and the female pronucleus once it's fertilized at that stage. So what we do is we remove both of those pronuclei one at a time so that we don't carry over a lot of cytoplasm from the mother. And similarly, we do it for the donor. So because both the pronucleus are taken out, both the pronucleus is inserted into the enucleated egg of the donor. So we know that it would come. When we are taking it out, we have seen that if we take very few, no cytoplasm at all, then it is risking the damage of the pronuclear getting damaged. So we may have little bit of and it may affect the development of the embryo as well. So we take when we take it out, we there will be little bit of cytoplasm which will come out with it, but when we transfer it, it is smooth, and we ensure that the pronuclear is not damaged or it doesn't break down.
Okay, that's excellent. But then when the babies are born, following this story,
Yes.
I'm sure you have followed them up. Are there any problems you find in the option?
Yeah, so this is a very, very new technique, as you know, really innovative technique, and babies have been born by this treatment. However, it is very important that we just don't rest on our laurels and not follow these babies up, because very new technique, there are a lot of uncertainties, unknowns. uh,
Yeah.
we have been at a very great advantage in Newcastle, that we have got a very expert research department and clinical department which cross talks with each other, so we could bridge that clinical research to clinical translation easily. And I oversee the research program for the ethics and everything, and the clinical egg donor and mitochondrial program. So it was a seamless translation with that. Alongside that, we also got permission as a team to monitor these babies for outcomes. So up to 18 months, but we are seeking to long-term monitor these children born through mitochondrial replacement therapies, which is very important, because for any program to be sustainable, we have to follow responsible ART. Are these babies okay? Are they developing fine? Are there any complications that we need to look at? Any adverse health outcomes because of this new combinations that we have created of mitochondrial DNA and nuclear DNA? We have had babies born. So far, things are looking promising. The program is running. We will be sharing our findings soon in publications. But it is very, very crucial that we don't forget the long term follow up of this and continue to use it responsibly, ethically, and under a regulated environment.
Yeah. I think besides reproduction, I think there's been some concept about using it for metabolic disorders too.
Yeah, so there have been thoughts about using it for other indications rather than reproduction, but it is very, very in its infancy stage. It will take some time and probably decades. As I mentioned, it took us more than 1.5 decades to get to the stage we are at before it can be used for those things. But it has opened up further avenues to explore options in other fields as well.
I'm sure there's so much of options now for assisted reproduction, branching out through different modalities. I think it's just amazing. I think it's been great talking to you, Meenakshi. I would have gone on talking for another hour or two, but since our podcast is for 15 minutes, I think we have reached the end of our 15 minutes. But yes, if you could just summarize if you could just summarize your talk, as I would say that yes, mitochondrial transfer is a very promising therapy, or replacement transfer is a very promising therapy for tomorrow. And today it is being done in a very, very ethical and legal way in only one center in UK. It's not yet being carried out in India or in any other country. I'm not sure which other countries are doing it. But at the same time, it's helping women who have mitochondrial disease from passing on that mitochondrial DNA, which is causing the disease, to the next generation. And I think that's a fantastic approach. And yes, it will have ramifications, I'm sure, on preventing other disorders like metabolic disorders. And we must make sure that whatever we do, we are treating the future generation, has to be ethical, has to be legal, and we must do our best to do it well. So I must thank you for all your support, and we will request you to, give us some more time, and we will do many more discussions. Maybe a webinar of 90 minutes would be great, and that would be bringing out many more details in this subject. And I thank Aspire, and I thank the Aspire board and my education committee, which I chair, is for permitting and allowing and promoting this particular program. we have a lot of Aspire podcasts which we have started, and they are called the Ed Talks. You could see them on our YouTube channel. We have many experts talking. And I would like to thank the Aspire team for being available to carry out this podcast, and to all the delegates who will be listening. So thank you very much, Meenakshi, for your time and for your
Thank you
expertise.
so much. Thank
Thank
you so much for having me. It's my
you.
pleasure.